Welcome back, everyone. My name's Bettina. I'm a product designer here at Figma working on FigJam. And this afternoon, I'm your host for this room. This is the last session of the last day. It's been an amazing time seeing everyone and hearing all these interesting ideas. Let's not lose momentum and give it up for our final speaker. Today, we have Sawyer Hood, one of Figma's software engineers, here to walk us through dev mode plugins. So everyone, please welcome Sawyer.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me, closing out config. Last day, you got Brian Chesky. Today, you got me on the main stage. But I'm so glad to be talking to you about customizing your team's workflows with dev mode plugins. If you saw the previous session right before, you may have seen all the amazing things you can do in dev mode. Jake showed you how to make plugins, or well, what plugins for dev mode are, and I'm here to show you how do you actually make these plugins for dev mode. And it's gonna be pretty radical. Sweet, wait, clicker, thank you. So I'm gonna set the stage a bit first. If you didn't see that past talk, let me just go over dev mode really briefly. Dev mode, of course, Chris said it much better than I did. It's a place for developers in Figma. We have things like improved code generation. We have things like improved inspection. There's a VS Code plugin. Dev mode has so many amazing things that you can plug directly into, right into a developer's workflow. And there's just, it's awesome. Like, as a developer, this is what I've wanted for so long in Figma. Yeah, round of applause for dev mode. And I'm going to say, like, the team's incredible. They've been working on it for so long, and it's just amazing to see this thing out there. But one of the things we had to, like, think about with dev mode, right, is, like, you really have to go down and think about what is the workflow of a developer. I know they touched on this a little bit in the session before, but let me kind of take you through this thought process. What is the workflow of a developer? And thinking of your normal developer, right, you may be thinking about someone, dark room, screens in front of them. They're probably at a computer, but that's maybe the only thing you can, like, say that all developers have in common, right? What platform are they implementing code for, right? Mobile, web, Vision Pro. If you work at Apple, hit me up. I want that dev kit, right? You can be really using a Figma design to implement a lot of different things. Next, these each have a different set of languages, right? JavaScript, TypeScript, Swift, Kotlin. Someone's out there writing code in Clojure. Think about that for a sec, right? Yeah, I know. Shout out to Clojure. Your different programming editors as well. All depends on the platform. Then think about all the different tools that exist. There's so many different ways that developers figure out what they're actually building. Are they using Slack, Teams? They're probably getting a design from Figma if they're in this conference, most likely. But then our little developer in front of a screen somewhere is surrounded by a sea of possible workflows. And you know, when we're making dev mode, you realize that there isn't a single developer workflow. And we have to figure out how to make dev mode flexible. And how do we make dev mode flexible? And I 100% spoiled this in the title of my talk, but it is via my good friend, plugins. Show of hands, who here has written a Figma plugin before? Oh, we got some Figma plugin people out there. Love the community. You are what makes Figma great. Thank you so much. So plugins, my TLDR, is that they're basically little programs that run inside Figma. They're written in JavaScript, HTML, plain web technologies, and they're kind of like any other web app, except they can freely read from the Figma document. So you can figure out what current nodes are selected, what layers exist, etc., and really use that to augment your program. So I'm going to say there's going to be a little bit of code in this talk, maybe a lot of bit of code. I'm going to really walk you through how we would make a plugin from scratch. But this is our first little teaser. Let's start off with a small Figma plugin. 4 lines of JavaScript. I know. It's humble, but it does so much. And if you've written some JavaScript before, this doesn't look too different than something you may be familiar with. Figma.currentPage, the core of the Figma plugin is, this is going to get meta, there's an object called Figma. And this is a lot like window that would exist inside of a web browser. You can access most of the API by using this Figma object. So in this case, I'm grabbing the current page, so the page the user is on. I'm getting the selection, and I'm just for looping over the nodes that a user has currently selected. And for terminology's sake, a node in Figma is what we would call a layer in the layers panel. We try to align it kind of with how you describe it in a document, an HTML document. So I'm using a normal JavaScript for of loop, and I'm just console logging the area of each node. So the one thing to get away from this is that plugins are just JavaScript. And if you know some JavaScript, you can probably start writing a plugin. So plugins 101, that's our first step. Let's talk about plugins for dev mode. The big thing, if you've written a plugin before, for my fellow plugin developers out there, viewers can now run plugins for the first time. Previously, before this point, the only people who could run plugins had to be editors on a file. They had to have full edit access, and they had to have an editor seat as a result. But now developers can run plugins without having to actually worry about them modifying the whole document and messing it up for you, you know? And this means that we can really reach a brand new audience with plugins. You can put these plugins directly in the dev handoff workflow. And I think Jake showed some of these off in the last talk, how you can actually augment the code that we generate, which is like so powerful, and you can really like help your developers out by doing this. So the other thing I want to point out is if you've seen a plugin before, like a Figma design plugin, they kind of live in these like floating modals. If you've seen them, if you've run a plugin before, you may have seen this. They're like these floating modals, and they're great, but they feel a little detached from the actual, editor. They don't feel like first party. With dev mode plugins, we wanted them to feel way more integrated into the actual experience. And we've done this by actually letting them either, as Jake showed off, integrate directly in the code panel, or they can actually take over that entire right-hand panel with an iframe. And then the final thing that's new with dev mode plugins, we have a whole host of new APIs that will let you build new features basically on top of the things that we've built. And so you don't have to start from zero when you're doing things like generating code. We have some things to help you get along your way and not have to re-implement everything we did from scratch. So now I'm going to go ahead, dive in, and actually show you a few dev mode plugins in action. This one has been shown off a lot, but I worked on this, so it's near and dear to my heart. This is the Jira plugin, and you can have a design selected, select an issue, link it, view all the details about this Jira issue, and other developers who go in here, or designers, can look and see what issues are attached to designs. And conceptually, this is a great use case for bringing external data from Figma, or outside of Figma, into Figma. So developers have all the context that they need. Next one, this is my favorite plugin. It's Anima. We partnered with them, and they built this amazing plugin. And it will do full code generation right from dev mode. So you can see I press this button down here. It's doing some work. It's taking its time. And it's going to open up a code sandbox with an entire, basically, almost like React site. You can see it's rendered in HTML over here, and it's broken up into different components that are super easy to read, and you could actually see how you could actually slot this into an actual app. They did such a good job. This is mind-blowing to me that we actually have this capability in Figma. My coworker Rohit made this next one. It's maybe a little funkier sort of use case. What if you could just talk to ChatGPT right inside of dev mode, right? Maybe a little far-fetched, but what if you could use the new OpenAI function calling API and have it actually read about the current document? You could really kind of make something really powerful here. So I've given you a few examples of plugins. Now is the hands-on portion of this talk, where I am actually going to go ahead and write a few plugins for you, live, unscripted. I want you to see, well, it's scripted. I'm going to show you actually how we may do this. Oh, sweet, and we are cut into Figma now. So here's Figma. You may have seen it before. Looks normal. And I've been given this beautiful design, truly best login page I've ever seen in my life. Never seen, just the designers know exactly what they're doing. And I need to go ahead and pop into dev mode. You've probably seen it. We have this beautiful toggle up here in the upper right-hand corner. I click it. Everything turns green. Immaculate. And let me give you a quick tour of dev mode before I get into the plugins. I can go ahead, go over here. Let's click on this button, for example. And you'll see we have this revamped inspect panel on the right-hand side. We can see things like component properties, what their current values are. We can see links to external resources. We have some generated CSS over here. We have things like color tokens extracted. Pretty nice. I'll give you also, where do these plugins live? You saw some videos of them. They live over here in this, turn up my brightness. They live over here in this plugins tab, which is now front and center in dev mode. I click this. We can run that Jira plugin I showed off earlier. Let's run the published version. And I can go ahead, create an issue. Jira stuff. But another thing, I don't know if this was highlighted earlier, we actually have a new feature, which is pinning plugins. I can actually go over here and save a plugin that I like and make it really easy to access later on. So, these are already pinned, but I can go over here, and it's right up here. Click on it. Super sweet shortcut to get easy access to plugins. And if I did want to pin a plugin, I can go here on this More Options, and rather than unpinning it, you would pin it, but it's already pinned. So, pretty awesome. OK, design time. I need to implement this design. I need to use my code editor. I got to make this beautiful modal, login page, modal, whatever it is. And going back over here, one of the things that I love about dev mode is I have access to these developer resources. These are links to things that will help me implement this design. I can go ahead, click on this, and you'll see I actually have the component documentation for this button. I'm using Shocker UI in this case, and it has everything I need to get started. I can import the button, an example of using the button, interactive example. Pretty nice. But it would be much better if I could just view this documentation in line. What I'm kind of thinking about, this is meta. You should try working at Figma because you have to look at Figma and Figma all the time. But this right-hand panel, I would love if I could just view the documentation right there without having to pop it open, look at a different window. It would just be so great right over there. So I think this is a good idea of what to build for our first dev mode plugin. I'm going to go ahead and hop into that right now. To create a dev mode plugin, right-click anywhere on the canvas, go to Plugins, Development, and you press New Plugin. We'll take you to this great wizard that'll ask you what you want to make. In this case, I want to make an inspect plugin. Those are those plugins that live over on the right-hand side. And I can go ahead and name this what I want. In this case, let's call it Doc Viewer. And I can save it, and it'll show up in Figma. You may have seen the Plugins tab. I've already set this up, so I'm not going to save it. But we can just go over to the Plugin tab, and this is essentially what you'll start out with. Go over to Plugins. I'll go to Doc View and run it. And it may be a little small, but you see we have a beautiful hello world right there. It's small, but it's going to get a lot better in a second. So why don't we go ahead and dive into the code for this plugin? One line. I love it. My favorite kind of programs. The only thing we're doing is we're calling this method Figma.showUI and giving it hello world. Figma.showUI is, in a way, the heartbeat of a plugin. It will let you pass some HTML, and it yeets it over in that right-hand corner. So any HTML you want, it'll show up there. So that hello world is a little tiny. Let's make it a bit bigger. I'm going to go in, and let's make it an H1 tag. And so this is just an HTML string. I'll save it. I'll go over, and it's a lot bigger now. There's something really subtle I just showed off here. And if you've written a plugin before, this is like brand new, and one of my favorite features we've added. Plugins hot reload by default now. So previously, yeah, shout out to that. The plugin developers are in like immense pain. They're like, why did it take you so long to do this? But I'm glad that we finally have this. So I can quickly iterate on my plugin and see it update right in the right-hand panel. OK, we have a big hello world. We're taking baby steps. But let's work up to something better. How do we get that dev resource in our code? Right now, we're just putting a string up there. I would love to put that link over on the sidebar. This is one of my favorite things about the plugin API. I've said this a few times. It's just JavaScript. And what I can do is open up plugins. So I'm in the desktop app, by the way. I can open up the Chrome Dev Console right from the desktop app. So I'll go to Plugins, Development, Open Console, and you will see we have a full developer console. Hopefully people can see that. And let's go back over to my button, which I have selected. I think it's actually already selected. Let's check. It is. And I can just start playing with the Figma API right from here. So again, there's that Figma global object. Let me type in Figma.currentPage. And you'll see I log some information about the page. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I get the current page that I'm on. And I can go ahead and get the selection from this too. And you'll see I have an instance selected. I can open this up and look at all the properties of this button that I have selected. This is a great way to play with the plugin API and really try to feel out what you want to do. And there's a lot of properties here. Another shout out, go to figma.com/developers. We have all sorts of documentation that actually tells you what all these things do. But I need to figure out how to get this developer resource, right? And I can go back, figma.currentPage.selection. Let's go ahead and get the first element out. This is an array of things that you have selected. And I'll go ahead and call get dev resources async. And I can await this. Any of our methods that end in async return a promise. And so let's go ahead and press enter. I get an array back. We can pop this open right in the console. Look at this object that's returned. And see that we have that URL for that button documentation right here. Pretty nice. I can go ahead. Let's go ahead and copy this directly. Copied. And we can just chuck this back in our editor. Let's make a method that's actually going to put this link over in the sidebar. I'm going to make async function. Copilot's like, it's raring to go. It's ready to fill this out for me. Render link. And let's go ahead and have it. What does it not like? Well, interesting. We'll have it render this link. And now we can actually get this resource out. Go ahead. Let's save it. So we should be getting, well, I guess we're getting multiple links. So let's grab those. And I think from these links, if we have a link that we got, let's go ahead and if we have links, let's put them in the sidebar. And let's make sure that we have a link here. let's go ahead and we want to do figma.showUI, and let's put that first link in there. So it's going to be links 0.url. So we're just getting that first element. And we got to call our render link function. Save. We have a link. Long journey just to get a link over there. Thank you for applauding. I don't know if it's worth it, but we're getting somewhere. OK, next, we have a link. One issue, if I click on this input, it still says I'm looking at a button. So our code's not that great yet. But luckily, Figma has event handlers. And if you've written some HTML before, you may be familiar. You can say things like button.onClick, document.onMouseMove, etc. Figma lets us do this as well. So I can go over here and say figma.onSelectionChange. And let's just render our link whenever the selection changes. Render link, and we'll save it. Now, we go back. Well, hot reloading's here, so we see that's the input link now. You're able to see right here, we have input. But if I click over to button, we got the button link. OK, we're getting closer. So, Sawyer, you're asking yourself, you just spent 10 minutes showing me how to put a link in the right-hand panel. This is not exciting content. Well, I did say that you can put any HTML you want over there. And we're pretty close. You know, we have the right information. We just need to put that documentation over there. And Figma Show UI can take any HTML, including script tags. So I can just go in here. Let me cut this out. And why don't we just write some JavaScript in our iframe? Let's do it. And we'll do, it knows. Copilot is like reading my mind. I can just change the location of that window over there. So I'm going to do window.location.href and do exactly what it said, more or less. Let's, well, we have to get the URL. Yeah. Let's close it, close out the tag, save. And now, oh, we crashed our plugin. Hold on. Oh, wait. Look at that. OK, let's close our script tag. Save it. Now we can go ahead and run it. Waiting. Is the internet down? Wait, hold on. I'm gonna cheat. We're so close. I actually have it finished. Let's copy this. We were one line away. Let's paste. Let's save it. Are we working? Oh, look at that. Wow, it's magic. OK. Yeah. Sorry, the buildup wasn't as great. Manipulating raw HTML, let me tell you, a little hard on stage. But, well, check this out. We have the documentation on how to use this button. I can interact with the actual code version of it. I can go over here, click on this input element. Dude. Play with the actual input element. We built something that's actually pretty powerful and pretty useful in only a few lines of code. And honestly, this is like such an incredible thing to use the plugin API for if I am building something with a pre-configured UI library like this, or an internal design system. And granted, would you ship these few lines of code exactly as is? Maybe not. There's maybe a few things to watch out for here. One, our loading state literally just says hello world, so we could do better. And second, we don't really have, the website you're hitting has to have the right headers in it to be embedded in the iframe. But this is the start of something great. And hopefully you'll be inspired to how you can integrate third-party tools inside dev mode. So yeah, OK. That was the more basic example. I'm excited to kick it up a notch and maybe show how we can actually build code generation plugins. So let's go back over to Figma. I can go ahead, right-click. Let's actually close this out. I can go ahead, right-click, plugins, development, and new plugin, and create a code generator. This is a plugin for CodeGen. And what this will let you do is add brand new languages into dev mode. So you can, I don't know, have it render Clojure, or whatever language you would like. And let's build one of these right now. So I'm going to go over to my next example. It's right next. It's just a different modal. And let's say that I'm here, but I really like this built-in CSS that we generate inside dev mode, but I would really like it if this gave me React code, right? Like, maybe that's what I want to use. I'm doing a brand new static site, and I would love to just have some React, copy it, paste it, right? I think that would be a great starting point. So I showed how I could make one of these CodeGen languages. Let's go ahead and run it. I can go to CSS. So basically, this is the language toggle. I go to development, and I have my React plugin that I hypothetically created. I can click it. This is not React. It's a JSON object that just prints the name of what you have clicked. In this case, I have the confirm modal clicked, or selected, rather. But let's take a dive into the code and see what this is doing. So I'm going to get rid of this other example. It served us so well. And we have a few more lines of code. It's a lot more than our one line that we started with. Let's make it, I'm going to blow it up again. But all the same principles apply in this case. We have this figma.codegen.onGenerate event handler. And Figma's going to call this anytime it decides that it needs to show new code in that right-hand panel. So if the user selects a new node, for example, or something changes on it, we'll go ahead and call this function. And right now, we're just returning a JavaScript object as a name, and we're just putting the name of that node on here. And we return some metadata about the code. What's the title of that section? So here it says CodeGen plugin, the code itself, and what language we should syntax highlight it as. Right now, it's just plain text. So we want to make a React plugin, so let's name it as such. Well, first, let's make this JavaScript. JavaScript. And we will name this React. Save it. Hot reloading has us again. It's got our backs. This says React, and this has some subtle syntax highlighting. But this is still just a JSON object. How do we get this to actually rendering out like code, like React code? Well, if you don't know React, I'll give you the quickest React primer ever. I have a code sandbox open. I have, again, the best React component I've ever seen. Red rectangle. It's big. It's beautiful. All this is doing is we have a function called myComponent. It returns a div, and it has some style properties on here that make it red. I think this is a great starting point for our code generation plugin. So I'm just going to copy this, copy it wholesale, and let's paste it in our plugin. So let's say goodbye to the old code, paste this in. Radical. I'm going to outdent this. We'll go ahead and save it. Check it out. We've got React code. It is the wrong React code, but it is technically React code. So we can end the talk. Here we go. We've written a React plugin. Congrats, everyone. No, we're going to make this work. We're going to make this look good. And you saw earlier, I opened up a node and I looked at all the properties, and there's a lot of properties. So you may be asking yourself, Sawyer, are you going to map every single property in the next 15 minutes so that I get a beautiful React output? No, I'm not. I'm a sane person. But I thought that the people out there writing plugins wouldn't want to do that either. And we actually let you leverage dev mode's built-in CSS generation in your own plugins. You can use this as a starting point to get you going. And we actually have a method for this that's on all nodes. It's called get CSS async. We can just call this and, well, render some CSS. So let's dive in. I think I'm going to grab the style. So style equals, oh wait, Figma, or it's event.node.get CSS async. We need to make this an async method. We're calling await. And I'm just going to go ahead and stringify this. And this, so what is this going to return is probably a good question. It returns a JavaScript object that's key value pairs of CSS property to CSS value. It will actually map up perfectly with the key values that we have over here in the default CSS generation. So let's go over, back to React, and let's put this in here. Let's put that style in. I'm going to go ahead, let's save it. Whoa, OK. We actually have things that look like it could be right in here. Moment of truth, let's copy it. Save it. Oh, wait. I have the whole, wait, hold on. Let me copy the inner thing. We don't need the background. Copy this. Moment of truth. Paste it. Save it. Oh, look at that. Oh, yeah. We have a rectangle. Pretty great. But what is front-end engineering if not drawing rectangles to the screen? Am I right? This is pretty good. One thing, it's good, but it's not perfect. One thing I want to show is over here, look at this horizontal scroll. I'm unhappy about this. Imagine you're like, oh yeah, dev mode plugin, so great. Oh wait, I have to scroll horizontally for like 3 minutes? No, thank you. Well, I'm using this as a shoehorned example, but one thing that we added recently in the past few months is that plugins can actually call the JavaScript fetch API directly. I know this seems like you should have had this again for so long. We finally let you do this, so you can call APIs right in your CodeGen plugin, or any plugin now. So I'm going to use this as an example. Let's pretend we have a hypothetical API called, I don't know, format.com/format. Let's go ahead, send this code up there, and format it for us. I'm going to import a little snippet that does this for us, so I don't have to manually write it. And all this is doing is using the JavaScript fetch API, hitting the server, and formatting this code. Let's rename this raw code. And let's pull out the code. Yep, Copilot knows exactly what I want. We'll save it. And we have formatted code. Granted, yeah. I didn't show you how. All it does is call it prettier. It's not that fancy. But you could imagine how in other CodeGen plugins, and I think this was touched on in the last session, you can use this to pull in data about your component library and use it to actually map the props one-to-one. You could do some pretty powerful stuff with it. So it's pretty exciting. OK. The code looks pretty, but we are still only drawing a rectangle. I want to be able to draw this entire modal. How am I going to go about doing this? Well, one thing is let me pop open the dev console again. We'll go to plugins, development, open console. We have all sorts of errors. That's great. We can sort of look at the selection, and kind of like we would look at what properties are here. Anything with children has a children property. We'll do that, press enter. This modal has that close button, a header, a body, more auto layouts, et cetera. And the way I like to think about a Figma document is it's a tree. It's a lot like an HTML document. Maybe that's the key thing about this is Figma is kind of like HTML, right? Similar structures, how you think about the plugin API. And I can kind of maybe step through each of these one by one and convert them into the equivalent React code. And this probably was not on your config bingo, but you're going to watch someone write recursive code on stage. It will only be like 4 lines of code, trust me. It will be pretty simple. But I think we can kind of go through this, maybe build the tree of HTML, and have it render over here so we can render a full big React component that will render exactly what we want. So let's do it. First thing, right now I'm just taking the only thing I've selected. We want to break this down so I can do one node at a time rather than just the thing that's selected. So I think we can make a new component. I'm going to go ahead and let's call it async function, maybe like make div. Seems pretty good. And we'll have this return a promise string. So it's going to return the code for a given node. And let's have this take in a node too. Node, C node. Right. And I think what we want to put in here is, let's see if Copilot has me. No, it's failed me this time. We kind of want to take this style and just put this div in. So let's go ahead and do this. That is not zoomed up. Let's do that. We're going to get our style out, take the node, and we just want to, oh, now Copilot has my back. Return just that div, right? So we're making a single div at a time. Let's go up. We'll go here. Let's update this to call our await make div function. And I'm going to get rid of this style. We're not using it anymore. Let's save. Make sure things are working. Fingers crossed. Wow, it looks the exact same. Great. Refactoring code. Sweet. Nothing broke, though. So there's one person clapping. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it was not clap-worthy, but thank you. OK. Now let's handle those children, shall we? So I think we can just check, does the node we're on have children? We can say if children in node. We now want to go over each of the children and make a div from it. So no, Copilot's wrong. Let's say divs equals, Copilot's right. OK. We want to go, oh, I know, we're doing async recursion here. There's a little bit happening. But I'm going over each of the child, calling make div on it, and then waiting for them all to finish. And then, Copilot's too good. I'm wrapping them in the div of the parent and just shoving all those divs in. The last thing I want to do is I need to handle text and make sure text renders properly. I can go in and say if characters in node. So if there's characters, that means there's text I need to render. And we're doing something again. We are going to just put the text inside the div and render it out. Let's save it. Oh my god. That's a lot more code. It looks like we're generating a lot of HTML now. Why don't we copy this and see if it looks right? We'll go in, Command A, Command V, say, whoa. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Granted, actually, let me revel in that for a moment. That was actually incredible. The fact that I was able to put together in a few minutes this thing that gives me a pretty good looking modal, it's pretty great. Granted, again, is this code production ready? Debatable. Everything is a div, which is generally not good. This is not accessible at all. These are not buttons. There's no X button up here, right? I'm not handling icons. But hopefully this gave you an example of, well, a starting point. You could imagine how you could take this and use this, like I said earlier, reading data about things that are in your external design system and actually pulling them into code generation. You can already see that dev mode has this has mapping of what different properties are set. You could map this to your actual code and make something really powerful, and really make it so engineers are using the things that are already built in their code base. And it's pretty exciting, if you ask me. Yeah. with that, I'm going to go back and maybe talk over some of the key takeaways that we had from this. Oh, sweet, fade in. So my number one thing is that if you know some JavaScript, you can probably make a Figma plugin. It's a lot building on top of foundational web APIs, and we just add a little bit of that Figma flair in. My other thing I want to go to is that you can now write plugins that viewers can use. You have to opt in to having a dev mode plugin, but once you do, you have a brand new audience that you can have plugin developers tie into, which is pretty great. The final thing, you can really make these plugins work with external tools, and you can even make brand new languages that your developers can, brand new languages to dev mode. And for example, have a Vue.js renderer that works with Tailwind or any weird combination you want. There's nothing stopping you, which is pretty nice. Thank you so much. My name was Sawyer Hood. If you are frothing at the mouth right now, you want to make a plugin, you're so excited, go to figma.com/developers. We have you covered. So much documentation on how to get started. And you can go look up the Friends of Figma Discord if you want to talk to someone and have us walk you through making a plugin. Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for spending time with me, with all of us at Config. And I hope you had a great time. Awesome.